5-5. All right, everyone. Hello, it's Dr. Anna Kambeka. I am here with a esteemed colleague and scientist, Kiran Krishnan. Good to see you, Kiran.
Good to see you, Anna. Great to be on here with you. This will be fun.
Well, we would have seen each other in Phoenix, I think, for the Institute of Functional Medicine.
Yeah.
So, and when did I last see you? Were you at IHS Integrative Healthcare Symposium?
Yeah. And you had a wonderful book signing at our booth. You had a big line of people just waiting eagerly to see you. So yeah, that's the last time I got to see you. When I got to squeeze in between all the adoring fans trying to clamor for some attention, I squeezed in there. I remember I gave you a hug and we chatted a bit.
Yes, it was awesome. And I miss that. Don't you miss these events where we get to really interact?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Our clients and our colleagues.
Exactly. I would go to 50 of them a year. So for me, going from 50 or so to nothing is a big change. So I'm eagerly waiting for them to come back.
Are you going stir crazy at all? Are you creating new products as a result of this free time?
Exactly. I'm conceptualizing all this new clinical research. And the crazy thing about it is you can't do research really well right now either because lots of universities are closed, right? So getting the studies going has been hard as well. And but I have had a lot of time with our staff. So we've gotten a lot of things done internally. This will be time that I wouldn't necessarily have with them. And then of course, trying to capitalize on some time with family as well, making the best of all of it.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. I know we've talked about some products that we're going to co-create in the future too. So I'm excited about that. But we've got pushed back in our R&D as well, but we're getting there. So I'm going to tell our audience about you as everyone's coming on. Let me know. I love to see where you're listening from, where you're watching. And today we're really going to hit on a very important, critical topic with Kiran Krishnan, who is a leader in gut health and microbiology in our immune system, first lines of defenses, and how we can really fine tune not just our overall health, weight loss, and our immunity, but just to really create a resilient and competent, capable body. So I'm excited for everyone to meet him and to be here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and now you're coming to us from Chicago right now, right?
I am. I'm in the suburbs of Chicago, in the western part of Chicago, where it's finally sunny and beautiful outside. It's 85 degrees, I think, today, so it's gorgeous.
Yes. And so let me just brag on you a little bit here. Kiran Krishnan is a research microbiologist, and he's been involved in the dietary supplement and nutrition market for the past 18 years. He comes from a university research background, having spent several years with hands-on R&D in the fields of molecular medicine and microbiology at the University of Iowa. Kiran established a clinical research organization where he designed and conducted dozens of human clinical trials in human nutrition. Kiran is also a co-founder and partner in New Science Trading LLC, a nutritional technology development and research company, and co-founder and chief scientific officer at Microbiome Labs. Now, I am, again, so glad to have you here with me and to be in community with you, but also just to let everyone know, I mean, this research in real people, right? Versus much of the microbial research done in petri dishes and rat and mice labs. So bringing this into the clinical field, it's really cutting edge science. So tell a little bit about your story, Kiran.
Yeah, in fact, that's how I got into the functional medicine space. I decided to leave academic research for a couple of reasons. Number one, it doesn't suit my personality to just be in the lab all day long. Especially the very last project I was working on before I left university was on an HIV vaccine project. So I was working with live virus. We were doing all kinds of interesting genetic manipulations in there, but trying to understand how HIV infects macrophages and then T cells, which means that you're in a BSL-3, which is a biosafety level 3. You're fully gowned, and you're the only person in that little room working in that hood, and you're in there 6-7 hours a day, and it just really doesn't suit my type of personality. I completely respect the people that do that for their entire careers, but I knew that I wanted to get out there and do something different, more out into the world, and really kind of what I call bridging the translational gap. So what does that mean? Well, there's all of this university research going on. There's a lot of amazing, profound work, but the vast majority of it will never see the light of day in terms of a market or impacting people in some way, right? University focus is very academic. It's all about funding for the next study, asking more and more and more questions, and you just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject, rather than thinking of how you can extrapolate that to make it impactful for people in the real world. So that gap exists, and that's a very well-known gap in the whole biomedical research world. So my focus was, how do I come out of academic research and fill that gap and take the scientific knowledge and make it something that's applicable to humans and effective for humans. So I started off my career by building a clinical research company where we would take what is known in the laboratory science or in the academic world and then pull it into human clinical trials to prove whether or not it works in humans. Because if you can prove it works in humans, then you've got something that has impact.
Well, I love that. I think that's just, again, what we're doing clinically and as a physician, using one of your products is how I came across you guys. I was at a conference and I heard some people talking about the Megaspore Biotic, and I was very interested because I'd been digging into probiotic usage for quite a number of years, because clients, women with hormonal imbalance, women with weight loss resistant, women with endometriosis, endometritis, all of these chronic persistent constipation, irritable bowel syndrome that really affects the quality of our life, as well as vaginal health, relates to like, how healthy is our gut microbiome?
Yeah.
And so it's really, I think it's fascinating because especially when it comes to virology and how that affects us. And I'm wondering what you're discovering too with the onset of the coronavirus. Like, what are things that we can absolutely be doing to increase our protection?
Yeah, that's a really important topic. Most recently, I've been giving lectures on the role of the microbiome in immune response, right? So we've all known to a certain degree that there's a connection there between the microbiome and immune response. But when you really dig into it to understand the connection, you start to realize that, in fact, the immune system cannot exist without the presence of the microbiome. And I can elaborate on that in a little bit. Another claim I'd like to make is that the microbiome is the neighborhood watch for the immune system. And I can explain what that means as well. So the first part, where the microbiome, the immune system wouldn't exist without the microbiome, your immune cells are made largely in your thymus and your bone marrow. Now, they go to certain localized regions like the mesenteric lymph nodes or the Peyer's patches, where they proliferate, multiply, and really get activated. That's where they mature into cells that actually go out and protect you on a regular basis. All of that capability of proliferating, maturing the immune cells, those are dependent on microbiome signaling. And without the microbiome signaling, both from the gut and other parts of the body, like the lung microbiome, the upper respiratory tract, the sinus microbiome, all of those microbiotas have to signal to the immune system to proliferate the T cells and B cells and mature the macrophages and mature the dendritic cells. So that part is really important. It'd be like, if you think of our immune system as an army, basically think about giving birth to a child, and when that child is 15, putting them into combat with no equipment, no knowledge, no information or maturity. Yes, they may have some innate capability for it, but they're not ready for it, right? Then in order to actually make them an effective soldier, you put them through basic training, through maturation, you equip them with the right equipment, and all of that work is being done by the microbiome. Right. So when they've done studies on sterile mice, no biotic mice, meaning mice that are grown and reared without a microbiome, their immune development is completely attenuated, right? So that's a really important part. Then the second part, where I mentioned that the microbiome is a neighborhood watch for the immune system. This is a really important part for people to understand. Okay, so in your body, the mucosa covers virtually every part of the inside of the body, right? This is a mucosal system. We used to always think about our skin as being the largest barrier, the largest organ, but the skin is about 2 square meters in surface area. The mucosa inside your body is 400 square meters, right?
Contrast. Wait, 2 square meters for our skin, and how many hundred square meters for
400 square meters on the inside of the body. That's amazing. So to put it in American context, because I think most people are watching here are Americans, that's almost 4,000 square feet, right? That's a massive. Any of us had an apartment or a house that was 4,000 square feet, we'd be pretty happy about it, right? And all of that square footage is wrapped up inside the body, in the digestive tract. Every orifice is covered with this mucosa. That's where all the action takes place. Anytime a virus, bacteria enters your system, it's going to end up in the mucosa, right? And that mucosa, what's interesting about it is that 4,000 square feet or so is also covered with over 40 trillion microbes that live there commensally, right? So imagine this idea that you've got 40 trillion microbes already, viruses, bacteria alike, already inside your system. Then you've got this one new virus that comes in. How is the immune system supposed to distinguish from all of the sea of microbes that already exist to that one that may be potentially harmful? The analogy I give, so the 40 trillion microbes that exist in the system, you've got about 200 million immune cells that survey that space. That's a 200,000 to 1 ratio, right? So the analogy I like to give people, because then it makes it real for them to understand the task, right? Imagine you're at a music festival, and we all have to only imagine that because it's not happening anytime soon. But imagine we're at like a really fun music festival, and it's in a pretty big area. In that music festival, there are 200,000 attendees, right? And among that 200,000 attendees, there may be 4 or 5 that are potentially harmful, meaning they might be harmful to other attendees around them. They may be bringing in all kinds of drugs and ill effects that could be hurting people in that area. And in that sea of 200,000 people, you have one security guard, and you are that one security guard, right? What are your chances of surveying that entire area to find that those 4 or 5 potentially harmful individuals? It would be virtually impossible. The only way you could do it is if the other 199,995 people were also keeping an eye out for you, and they all had radios. And if they saw something that was dysfunctional, they would radio to you, tell you where they were, and you could come over there, right? So they are a neighborhood watch. That's how the immune system works. The microbiome, the 40 trillion organisms that cover every part of your body, are keeping an eye out for new invading species. The moment the new invading species comes in, they signal to your immune system that, hey, there's something you need to pay attention to here. Come check it out. Because it's impossible for the immune system to protect this whole ecosystem on its own.
All right. That's a tremendous amount of information in it. So what happens, Kiran? What goes wrong? Like, where does this, beautiful gut, healthy mucosa, what affects it? What breaks it down? What hurts us?
Yeah. So, and especially from an immune response perspective, right? The thing that really hurts us is, number one, having low levels of diversity within the microbiome, meaning through this entire amazing ecosystem of microbes, you've got low diversity. You don't have a whole lot of diversity in terms of players. So you don't have a lot of mechanics available to conduct function. That's one of the things. Number two is having too many opportunistic or even pathogenic organisms within your system, because one of the things that pathogenic organisms are not going to do is they're not going to alert your immune system to the presence of a new pathogen, because many of them are sitting and waiting for the situation to go awry, because then that's when they take over and they start expressing their virulence factors, right? So think about Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex virus, or different types of bacteria like Klebsiella, certain types of E. coli. They're actually hanging out as part of this 40 trillion commensal bacteria and viruses, but they are waiting for something else to come in, create havoc, and then they start actually rearing their ugly head, right? So when you have too much of a high level of inflammatory, potentially pathogenic bacteria and viruses, it actually attenuates your microbiome's ability to help the immune system. And then another big part of it is the leaky gut, right? Leaky gut is the biggest driver of chronic low-grade inflammation. So now you've got inflammation all over your body all the time. That really attenuates immune response. And here's why: because the immune system requires inflammatory signals to alert it to infection, right? One of the first things that happens in this, COVID is an excellent example of that. When it comes in, it starts infecting a cell. The cell that it's infecting starts shooting out inflammatory signals as flares or alerts to tell your immune system that something is going wrong in this spot. All of the microbes that surround that area will start releasing inflammatory signals to try to direct your immune system to that area, right? So that inflammatory signal is like an alarm to the immune system, so it knows where to go. The problem is, if you have inflammatory signals going on all over your body, the immune system gets completely misdirected. It allows this pathogen to overgrow over a longer period of time. That's why when you look at something like the current pandemic, people with chronic low-grade inflammatory conditions, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, cardiovascular disease, are the ones that are most susceptible, right? Diabetes is a great example. 7 times higher mortality rate in diabetics than non-diabetics for COVID. And that's because diabetes is the hallmark of an inflammatory condition. So yeah, that's where some of the things go right. And it starts with dysbiosis. It starts with harming the gut bacteria, which can be through antibiotics, Roundup, poor diet, poor lifestyle choices, so on. There's so many things we do that harm our microbiome.
But we can correct it, right? There are ways, and you're going to talk through some ways that we can correct it. And I'm excited about that. One of the things that you talk about, endotoxemia, metabolic endotoxemia. Will you explain what that is and how leaky gut is part of that problem?
That process, yeah, absolutely. In fact, and the way I even thought about, like, we need to focus on this as a company, was because when you're doing laboratory research in microbiology, you work a lot with tissue culture. You work a lot with what we call KCO2 cells. These are intestinal epithelial cells, right? Because lots of microbes live in the gut. So you're trying to grow microbes in that type of environment. You actually make the intestinal cell line permeable by dripping LPS on it. So you can buy LPS, lipopolysaccharide, and I'll explain in a second what that is, but you can buy that and drip it on the gut lining cells and make the gut lining cells permeable. And so, I remember that we did that all the time. It's just routine practice, right, in research. Then when I came out and we were thinking about probiotics and gut health and what are the big problems we want to solve, I kept thinking, like, there's a lot of LPS that's released in our mucosa, right? Because we have a lot of bacteria that live in our guts, which are normal bacteria, not necessarily even pathogens, that make this LPS, this endotoxin. This endotoxin is typically a part of the bacterial cell membrane, and this bacteria uses it for various reasons. But when the bacteria dies, that endotoxin is released, and now it's like this floating around toxin all by itself in the top layer of the mucosa. If your intestines are permeable, then it allows that endotoxin to leak through and enter your blood circulation, right? So that then becomes a big problem. Now, the presence of the endotoxin itself will help make the intestines permeable, because like I said in research, we use it all the time to make intestinal cells permeable. So then I started digging into this metabolic endotoxemia, or endotoxemia meaning LPS being released, making your gut permeable, then leaking through into your circulatory system. And is that really a problem? As it turns out, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of studies on it showing that not only is it a problem, it is at the root cause of the vast majority of chronic illnesses in the US. So great number of studies showing it being the root cause of cardiovascular disease, the number one predictor and driver of type 2 diabetes, right? The root cause of Alzheimer's, the root cause of obesity. In fact, metabolic endotoxemia and leaky gut come first, and then that increases your risk for becoming overweight. The root cause of dementia, of polycystic ovarian syndrome, of hormone dysfunction. I mean, so many things. The list just goes on because it's setting up this low-grade chronic inflammatory state in your body.
Mhm.
So we allow that endotoxin to leak through on a daily basis into your circulation. You're creating this little mini sepsis or bacteremia in the body, and it's really, really toxic and very inflammatory.
Creating brain fog, right? Aches and
Yeah.
pains in the joint, crashing fatigue, mood swings, mood disorders, all of those things that be part of it.
Anxiety, depression, it's so directly related because that little toxin is really pervasive. It can get into many different parts of the body. It can get into the dorsal vagal complex in the brain stem that basically stops the peristaltic and contractile motion of the gut. So you end up with constipation and stasis that develops into SIBO. It can get into the amygdala and hippocampus and really shut down, recall and memory, creating the brain fog you mentioned. It can get and interfere with dopamine binding and serotonin binding in the brain, so causing anxiety, depression. It's really amazing how pervasive it is and how potent it is at starting the process of disease in the body.
And that's a big factor. Like, it's not about, often like where we're going to have leaky membrane. If we just consider it the root cause of all diseases, leaky membrane, right?
Mhm.
That loss of connection, like as it is in human beings and social connection, that loss of connection and healthy communication between cells, it's that breakdown. And whether it's in the gut, in the blood vessel, in the brain, wherever we have those leaky membranes, so to speak, is where we're going to have the deposit or the most significant symptoms as well.
Absolutely, and when you have this flood of continuous inflammatory generators into your system, then wherever your weak link is, that's where you're going to see the most profound condition pop up, right? And so, and the thing is, in the U.S., 60% of adults have at least one chronic illness. 40% of adults have multiple chronic illnesses, right? So it becomes a self-perpetuating cascade because the root cause of so many of these conditions are the same, even though the conditions seem unrelated. Like I do a whole lecture on this idea of total gut restoration, and I show all the studies that show that reflux has the same root cause as anxiety. Right? And anxiety has the same root cause as diabetes. And for the most part, if you go to your doctor and say, hey, doctor, what does my reflux have to do with my anxiety? They would say nothing. One is in your upper part of your GI and one's in your brain. Or if you go to your doctor and go, what does my diabetes have to do with my reflux? They'd say nothing, right? It's two different parts of the body. Yet it's all the same originator, the same root cause. And when you have that root cause still perpetuating, it's easy to develop multiple conditions, one after the other. And so, the beauty of functional medicine, the reason that it attracted me to it, is the ability to look at root cause and address those types of things.
Yes. Yeah. I keep saying, what are the smallest changes I can make that are going to give me the biggest results? And that's at the cellular layer. So that is definitely, this is really huge. And for everyone who is listening, we're with Kiran Krishnan. I say that correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who is the Chief Scientific Officer of Microbiome Labs and developer of great clinical products and programs and protocols in helping us heal from this, really underlying leaky membrane issue and endotoxemia, and how that does promote a healthy immune system, a healthy fortified first line of defense. And so what are some things that we can do, everyone listening, we can do? We're streaming right now also to my Keto Green community that have been following the Keto Green plan, doing the intermittent fasting, making sure they're getting healthy fats and omitting sugar as much as possible, as much as we can, staying very low carb and getting into this keto alkaline state that we love. So, so like what else? What else can
Yeah.
we be doing?
So the intermittent fasting is wonderful. Such a great, simple, easy thing to do. I know it takes some people some time to work up to it, which is totally fine. But that's a kind of a no-cost thing to do that really helps your microbiome. In fact, studies show that increases diversity in your microbiome over time. Other simple things to do would be working on stress management. So stress is a huge driver of permeable intestines and permeable membranes. One of the things that stress does is the stress hormones, when they elevate, it signals to those latent viruses and bacteria that you have within your system that the system is compromised. So they're going to start trying to multiply because they are opportunistic and they only multiply when the system seems compromised to them. So that's an important thing. We cannot stress stress management enough to help prevent further damage or leakiness of the gut and membrane, and also to bring down the inflammatory response in the body. Of course, you've got exercise. So low impact and low intensity exercise actually does help reduce the permeability in the gut. The university that we did our very first leaky gut study with actually had a study where they showed just a 30-minute moderate exercise before a meal actually reduced the endotoxic or leaky response from that meal. So low-grade exercise helps. Getting outside really helps. Lots of studies show that the closer you are in terms of proximity to nature, and we're talking about like natural environments where you can go for hikes, national parks, parks in our area. There's a lot of forest preserves where you can go on hikes, mountain bike rides, and all that. Those things in itself will have an impact on your overall microbiome. Adequate sleep. I know it sounds generic. Lots of people say that. It is good for you in many ways, but from your microbiome perspective, it's absolutely critical. Your microbiome is something called a diurnal system. A diurnal system meaning it has a 24-hour cyclical clock, and it matches the circadian rhythm of the body as well. So when you go into this rest state overnight, different microbes proliferate that do a lot of housekeeping function. They clean up the system. They help remove dead and damaged cells and DNA and debris. They help rebuild that mucosal layer that's really important. They stimulate rebuilding kind of genetics within the host itself, so you can repair your mitochondria, you can repair your cells, and so on. So that sleep period, that fast and sleep period, activates all of those repair mechanisms. Another simple thing is utilizing like a spore-based probiotics. We do all our research with Megaspore Biotic, the spore-based probiotic. One of our very first studies we did was on leaky gut. And what we wanted to show is that you can actually utilize something like a spore-based probiotic to tighten up those tight junctions, seal up that membrane, and prevent that LPS endotoxins from leaking in to the blood. And sure enough, we were able to show that. Study published in a major gastroenterology journal. And not only, of course, did we stop the leakiness, but all of these inflammatory markers went down dramatically. And another really interesting caveat from that study is we saw metabolic response to the presence of food being reestablished. That is the gut-brain connection, right? So that was really interesting to us, because one of the things we started seeing in those patients that were in the study was that they would come in fasted, right? So they would come in a fasted state. We'd ask them to fast for 12 hours before they came in, which means that their hunger hormone, the ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, those levels would tend to be high. So which is totally normal. We expected that. And then we would give them like a 2,000 calorie meal, and we would see ghrelin levels barely drop below the peak, right? And then start to go back up again very quickly, which means that the gut and the brain aren't talking. The gut's not telling the brain, hey, you've got enough food coming in, stop producing the hunger hormone, right? In fact, you want to see leptin going up, producing satiety and starting to burn the calories as fat, turning on triggering mechanisms to start all of your cells start burning fuel, burning fat, especially for fuel. So that whole connection got disrupted in these people with severe leaky gut. Then in 30 days after giving them the probiotic for that 30-day period, they came back. Of course, the leaky gut was basically gone, but then we see the ghrelin response totally reestablished, right? So they come in fasted, ghrelin would be here, they would eat the meal, and then ghrelin would drop 50% within the first hour or so. So now we've reestablished that gut-brain connection, which helps people not feel hungry when they don't need to eat, and it helps the whole tendency of overeating. Right, so those are simple things, a few simple things that people can do. The rest, the adequate rest, getting out in nature as much as you can, some low impact exercise always helps the microbiome. Getting the spores into your system. If you have we have a prebiotic, which is an oligosaccharide based prebiotic that really helps the keystone strains within your gut. These are really protective, important strains. They specifically grow the keystone strain, so that would be good as well into the system. And then overall, just kind of trying not to utilize personal care products and all that have too many egregious chemicals in them. We've got so many products that we're surrounded by all the time that have all kinds of antimicrobials, antifungals, and all that in there that actually has an impact on our ecosystem. So we want to be careful of those too.
So true, so true. And Kim wrote in, she said, Dr. Anna, many of these recommendations are changes that you have us make in the hormone. Absolutely are. And that is a reason, because it takes more, right? It's more than food, and it takes more than hormones to fix our hormones. It's all of these things. And there's so many. And actually in both the Hormone Fix and in my new book, Keto Green 16, I use Microbiome Labs as a resource. And that's really a powerful, resource. You've got such good information. And I often rotate in the Megaspore Biotic. Now, I will admit that I use Mighty Maca as a prebiotic.
That's great. Maca's fantastic. Yeah. So that's why I would use that myself. So.
Yeah, so that sounds good. And a couple things. One of my favorite products, whether I've recommended as a DIY lubricant, whether we have cooked with it, whether we incorporate it into our keto coffees or keto tea, can be an instigator of this lipopolysaccharides, this metabolic endotoxemia. And, it can be an area where even doing all of these things right, that this product can be interfering. And that is coconut oil.
Yeah. And coconut oil is a very unique oil, right? So when you look at its composition, it's got the highest natural amount of saturated fat. Right, it's upwards of 90% or more saturated fat, and some of the fats are very unique. It's got these long chain fatty acids that are strong antimicrobials. It's also got medium chain fatty acids that are also strong antimicrobials. So that's kind of the issue with it in general, is that of course it has a lot of nutritional qualities that are really important, beneficial. But when your gut is tenuous, when your microbiome is dysbiotic and off, then the long chain fatty acids can act as antimicrobials and release more LPS. Because remember, the LPS is released when the cell is dead. It dies, it opens up, the endotoxin gets released. So when you're taking something in that's an antimicrobial, it can release more LPS. Then also, because of the high content of saturated fat, it causes your body to produce these things called lipid rafts, because your body wants to go across the intestinal lining, grab the fatty acids, and bring it in for the nutritional value of the fatty acids. The problem is the LPS, that lipopolysaccharide, the first part lipo means that it is a fatty acid itself. So the lipid rafts do accidentally grab a bunch of the lipopolysaccharide as well and bring it in. So you can get a higher endotoxic response. So that's the double-edged sword with it, is that some people's microbiomes aren't conditioned to handle it. And that may be in part where your ancestors come from, right? Because most coconut is grown in equatorial areas, so around the equator of Earth. So people who live in equatorial areas, like where I come from, India, Malaysia, coconut is in everything, right? And always has been for generations and generations. But people from Northern Europe have never seen a coconut. So their bodies may not be as tolerant to it. But there's ways around it, which is a good news.
So tell us some of those ways around it.
Yeah. So number one, other fatty sources are really can help. So for example, extra virgin olive oil. study done by the American Diabetic Association showed that there's this much increase when you have coconut oil as a main fat in lipopolysaccharide. Then when you have use extra virgin olive oil instead, it actually drops much further. It actually goes below baseline. So extra virgin olive oil can actually reduce the amount of endotoxemia. Omega fatty acids actually reduce the amount of endotoxemia as well. But then also, if you fix your microbiome, meaning using the spore-based probiotics, some prebiotics, you'll actually reduce that endotoxic response within the gut. In our first study, we were challenging people with a really high-fat fast food meal. Right, we were trying to induce the highest amount of endotoxemia we possibly could because we wanted to see a real drastic difference. That was better for the statistics as well to be able to visualize a bigger difference. So we were giving these people, when they would come in fasted, we would give them a really high calorie fast food meal. And that has bad fats in it. Everyone knows that, and all kinds of preservatives and bad stuff. So we would see this huge endotoxic response. Then after 30 days of just taking the probiotic, the endotoxic response is completely blunted, even though we're giving them the same fast food meal, right? So even against something as bad as a fast food meal, with a healthy microbiome, you can protect yourself against that response. So our position is, if you're new to it, if you're new to coconut oil, then maybe taper in with using things like omega fatty acids, olive oil instead. And then if you want to slowly increase your coconut oil intake for various reasons, make sure you're taking your spore-based probiotics and fixing your gut first. Then your gut should be able to handle it after that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such great recommendation. And the question is, yes, coconut oil and MCT oil, same effect, same process. And, we received, Andrea wrote in from Facebook. She said, how young can leaky gut begin? Could a 12-year-old have it already? We have infants with leaky gut.
Yeah, absolutely. So humans are actually born with their intestines completely permeable. And then usually within the first year or so, it's supposed to start tightening up as they develop their own microbiome, right? So the infant microbiome is really tenuous in the first 6 months until you start introducing solid foods, and then it starts shoring up to look more diverse, more like an adult microbiome. At that point, the mucosas develop well, the tight junctions are starting to line up. But if that infant's had, C-section birth, didn't get the proper inoculum, had a couple of rounds of antibiotics already, then it's just going to stay leaky. It's not really going to seal up. Or let's say it's sealed up and the infant and the child was healthy, but at 3-4 years old started developing a bunch of ear infections and getting multiple courses of antibiotics, it'll all open up again. So you can absolutely have children with very leaky guts. And in fact, that may be a big driver in the infant rate of asthma, the childhood rate of asthma. I think the US has 9 million kids with asthma right now. It's a massive problem. We have allergies that plague our kids, eczema, psoriasis. All of these things tend to be related to that leakiness in the gut.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's never too early to start repairing it either. And following these principles make a really big difference.
Yeah.
Sue wrote in from Facebook. She said, is there some sort of test to identify how leaky a person is? And I do write about some of this testing in the Hormone Fix with some options. What do you recommend, Kiran?
So when we do clinical trials with it, we use a test where we're directly measuring LPS in the blood. The problem is you can't do that commercially because LPS in the blood is pretty unstable, meaning after about 4 hours, it's hard to find it because it's embedding itself in different tissues and so on. So that test is what we use in the lab, but we can pull samples immediately and test them. In a regular commercial setting, the best thing is to look at something like surrogate markers. So surrogate markers are inflammatory markers that increase in response to the gut being leaky. So things like soluble CD14, interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, TNF alpha. These are the markers that elevate when your gut becomes leaky and starts creating all this inflammation. And again, you have to work with the doctor directly to get those ordered. So it's a little bit more complex. But here's the thing. you can assume your gut is leaky if you live in the Western world and you have any sort of condition at all, right? In our first study, we look for perfectly healthy, normal individuals. What does that mean in American context? Well, it means that they didn't have any diagnosed or defined chronic condition. They weren't taking any medications or anything. They did not report any conditions at all, right? So those were the individuals we looked at. And among those individuals, 55% of them had really dramatic leaky gut, right? So if you have any conditions at all, you have allergies, you have asthma, you have some anxiety, you've had hormone issues, you almost certainly have leaky gut. It's just so prevalent in our society.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the core recommendations is our probiotics for that reason. Explain a little bit the difference between spore biotic and probiotic. And I then we're going to wrap up, but I could talk with you all day. I could talk, I know we could get into this in so many avenues. I definitely would love to have you back too.
Yeah, it'll be my pleasure to come back. Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why we went with spore-based probiotics is we were looking for microbes that can act as probiotics. So that to fit that first part, it has to survive through the gastric system naturally, right? So our gastric system, which is our stomach with the very low pH, the highly acidic environment, is designed to kill bacteria. And microbes that enter into the system. Then if you can get past the stomach, then the next thing is the bile salts in the upper GI. That's going to kill bacteria as well. The pancreatic enzymes are going to kill bacteria as well. So there's a big gauntlet for bacteria to get through in order to get to the intestines where they're supposed to function as a probiotic. Our simple thought was, are there bacteria that have the natural capability of surviving through this? And if they do have the natural capability, maybe they're designed by nature to act as probiotics, right? If we have to go and add a bunch of engineering to these bacteria to try to get them to survive, then they're not necessarily designed to do that. So we found these endospore bacteria that actually have this capability of surviving through the whole system. Then when we started researching them more, we come to realize that they've been used in Europe, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia as prescription probiotics since 1952. Right? They've been used for over 65 years in these other regions, and they use them specifically for gut infections because these bacteria have a really unique capability. They can go in the gut. They'll use something called quorum sensing where they read other bacterial signatures. They will find pathogenic and overgrown dysfunctional bacteria. They'll sit next to them and they'll produce things like antibacterials, antimicrobials. They'll compete for nutrients and they'll kill off those bad bacteria. Right. So that is their main use for over 60 years in the prescription space. So our hypothesis was, number one, they are naturally probiotics. Nature's designed them that way. Number two, if they can bring down the growth of bad bacteria, maybe they can increase the growth of good bacteria. And so that's what we focus on. And we come to find out that they do. They do increase the growth of good bacteria very dramatically. And ultimately, within the microbiome, to have any profound effect, you have to be able to affect all of those microbes that exist there. Because remember, we've got 30, 40 trillion organisms in the gut, right? And any profound change is going to require making a change to that sea of microbes in the system. These spores have the capability of making a profound change in that sea. That's when you really will feel the difference, right? So that's what we love about the spores, and that's why we've been working with them and doing all the studies with them. The first study showing that they can heal up leaky gut. Once you know you can heal leaky gut, then the opportunities are endless. And we've done 9 other studies since then on the spores.
Yeah, I know. I've seen many of them, very impressive, and especially the drop in lipid polysaccharides, seeing that those numbers decrease. It's incredibly, healing all the way around. We've gotten a few more questions in from Facebook here. Claudia wrote in. She said, "My daughter's 16 and has suffered from acid reflux, nausea, constipation, and some stomach pain since she was 5. She's seen a gastro specialist and did many tests, including colonoscopy and endoscopy, and he said that all tests are normal. She has also developed rosacea in the face. So without a doubt, she has leaky gut."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing with leaky gut. I mentioned this earlier, that one of the ways that LPS really affects you is it gets into an area called the dorsal vagal complex in the brain stem. That is the part of the connection between the gut and the brain, where the brain is sending signals to the gut to do the peristaltic activity to move the food down the system. Also, it triggers something called the migrating motor complex, which is this electrical sweeping across the stomach, and small and large intestines. That keeps the bowels moving, it keeps the intestines clean, and it keeps it prevents the overgrowth of bacteria in the small bowel as well. That's what keeps it all functioning and moving. Now, when you stop the bowels and the bowels get that stasis, you start getting overgrowth of bacteria in the small bowel. That gives you a lot of pain, distension, bloating, that indigestion feeling. You slow down gastric emptying, meaning when food enters the stomach, it sits in the stomach for too long. It doesn't empty into the small bowel. That creates pain and cramping as well. And then all of that will increase leaky gut dramatically. So then your small intestines become incredibly leaky. Then you've got this chronic inflammation, and then that can show up on your skin in many ways. It can show up as acne, or it can show up as autoimmune type of conditions like psoriasis, eczema, and so on. So it's all connected, and I would say that addressing the leakiness in the gut, the movement of her bowel, is going to be a huge benefit to her, among other things that you may be doing with your doctor.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then Cheryl asked the question that I think many are thinking: if we aren't experiencing leaky gut, is it okay to do our coconut or MCT oil? I'm confused now. I hear you, Cheryl.
Yeah. And again, I would just, because here's the thing, leaky gut for the most part is subclinical, right? It could be happening for years. You would not even know it. It's just setting up a disease state somewhere in your body. And like we said, the weakest link in your chain at some point will snap. And it could be your hormones, it could be your metabolic health, it could be your skin or something like that. So you can assume that unless you have specifically address gut microbiome health, that you may have leakiness in the gut. So I would say do the coconut oil, but then take your spores and then do the other things we talked about to help with the microbiome. That's the most surefire and healthy way to proceed, so that you get all the benefit without the risk.
And typically when we're taking spore biotics, Kiran, we're using, like, I often, you can tell me if I'm doing this right or wrong, but I'll often cycle no probiotic or spore biotic. I'll cycle probiotic. I'll cycle spore biotic, one bottle at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the best way for us to do this?
Yeah, I mean, the way we do our research, most of our studies are based on a 30 to 90 day dosing of the spores. So I would say your first go around, if you've never done it before, then start with a plan to do a 90-day go around of the spores. At the end of the 90-day, you can kind of taper off. And if you want, you can cycle in other ingredients or products at that point. But then, every about 30, 40 days, go back and do another cycle of the spores, just to keep your gut up and healthy. The fact of the matter is we have too many things around us that really harm the gut microbiome. All of the toxins and chemicals and all that stuff that we're surrounded by all hurt the gut microbiome. So you need some continuous support within the system. But think about starting with like a 90-day period where you're really getting the spores in there and getting them to make the changes within the microbiome.
And I'll put a link to Microbiome Labs Mega Spore Biotic. Where can they get that product? And you also have Mega Mucosa, and you're going to give some away. So we're going to do that for those who are with us live right now. Those who are listening, we'll put some links in the show note. But we are going to give a few away while we're live right now too. Karen, Brittany's here to do that. So
yeah,
where otherwise do people buy the Mega Spore Biotic?
Yeah, so they can come to microbiomelabs.com, and they can sign up as a patient. And if they have a practitioner code, Anna, you might have a practitioner code. If you don't, we can provide you one. So then they can actually order the product through your own code, because we don't sell directly to consumers. We only sell through health practitioners. So we could provide that if they want to come on and sign up as a patient or send us an inquiry, they can do that as well. That would be the easiest way to do it. So it's a patient direct system where through Anna's code, you can actually directly order it from us. We'll drop ship it to your home.
Yes, and I will put that information here in the notes. And also for now, though, if you guys go ahead and order, you can just say referred by Dr. Anna, and
Mhm,
then they'll connect you because they know we have spoken.
mhm.
And that's really important. All right, Brittany, you ready to give some good stuff? What do we want to give away first, Kieran?
So
A bottle of what do we want to do?
yeah, well, I'm happy to give away a bottle of Megaspore, a bottle of a tub of the Mega Mucosa, and we can do the Mega Prebiotic, all three. That's a total gut restoration system.
Okay, we're giving away a total gut restoration system. So I think that's amazing. That's so generous. So Brittany, whenever you're ready, here we go. Adding you to our stream here. We'll wait for Brittany to pop up.
Mhm.
And we have our wheel of names that we're doing. But I'm excited about the Mega Mucosa product too. Here we
Yeah.
go.
Oh, that's cool. I love this.
I know. This is really good stuff. Hold on. Adding to the stream. There we go. We are ready.
All right.
Do. And everyone who's entered, their names have been put in. Alicia Hernandez. Congratulations, Alicia. Awesome.
Congratulations. Yes, we're
Great.
happy to ship it to her. If you want to do another, we can give away another of the same set.
Okay, let's do it. Brittany, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So if you guys have commented, and that's how you get entered into our wheel of names. Awesome. Oh, yes. One of our Keto Green 16 superstars,
Awesome.
Lois Door Coppola. Awesome.
Congratulations,
Awesome. From
Lois.
the Northeast.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll be excited to send it over to her.
How fun. How fun. That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And then in talking about the gut restoration program, how do you take that? How do you recommend we use that?
Yeah, so what we tell people to do is start with the Megaspore for the first 30 days. So that's their first bottle that they get. Taper it up, start the first week with about 1 capsule every other day. And then the second week, go to 1 capsule a day. And by the third week, go to 2 capsules a day. And when you're doing the 2 capsules, take them at the same time. And always take it with food. So then as you taper up, by the time you get to the end of the third week or beginning of the fourth week, you could start adding in a scoop of the prebiotic. It's a powder scoop. So mix it in with a bottle of water and sip that throughout the day. Do that for 30 days. And then in the next 30 days, you add in a scoop of the Mega Mucosa as well. So just take it one step at a time with each of those.
I love it. I love it. That's fabulous. And microbiomelabs.com, right?
That's right. Yep. Microbiomelabs.com with loads of info on there for you to look at.
Yeah, excellent. We keep getting questions in. Nevada asked from Facebook, would you give this to someone with dementia?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. There's a huge connection between the gut and the brain and the inflammatory drivers in the gut that drive things like dementia. So it's really important to support a healthy gut and function of the gut in people who have dementia, whether it's early stage or advanced. You can always support their gut and it should be beneficial.
Yeah, often, just reducing the inflammation, they are doing so much better by reducing the inflammation. I've seen it over and over and over again in sick patients with neurologic issues that manifest and dementia, memory loss, confusion, and you just clean up their gut and get them keto green. And it is amazing the differences that you will see. And never too old, never too old.
Absolutely.
So Luann wrote in, and then we'll close. She wrote in, if someone is taking antibiotics after surgery, should they wait until after they are done with the meds to begin restoring their gut?
No, absolutely not. With the spores, you take it right with your antibiotics. It's the opportune time to do it because remember the antibiotics are going to be causing all kinds of disruptions in the gut, and every time you take a dose of antibiotics, everything comes down. All of the bacteria come down, and then when the antibiotic fades away, meaning after about 3 hours of the dose, then the microbes start coming back. But what comes back at what proportion is where you start getting your screwed up microbiome after the antibiotic. So if you're taking the spores with the antibiotic, the spores will work in the presence of antibiotics, it'll control the regrowth of bacteria and help promote like a much healthier reestablishment of the gut microbiome. We actually have a paper on that should be publishing sometime in the next couple of months, showing that once the damage occurs with antibiotics, the presence of the spores starts undoing some of that damage. So take it with. You don't have to necessarily space it away from the antibiotic. If you can, you should space it 2 or 3 hours after the antibiotic. But if you can't space it, you can still take it together.
Yeah, I always recommended taking it, at the opposite time of the day if possible from the antibiotic. So, microbiomelabs.com. This is Kiran Krishnan, and he has just been a gift to all of us today. And I just want to thank you so much, Kiran, for being with us today. And can I ask you, it's what do you call it? A roulette question, basically.
Yeah, of course.
What is your evening ritual? What helps you wind down and get a good night's sleep? Because I can see how energetic you are. Do you sleep, first of all?
I still till to this day work till about 1 a.m. I've always been a bit of a night owl. So the kids, I help put the kids to bed somewhere around 8:30 and 9, and then my mind starts getting really active at that time, and that's when I actually do a lot of the reading. I of course have to study loads and loads of research. So then between about 9:30, 10ish till about 1 in the morning, I'm actually reading and putting together all the research for everything that we do, and that is actually kind of a calming thing for me, because your brain becomes really focused. I'm not thinking about the problems from day to day that occur. I'm not thinking about any stressors. I'm just kind of delved into the science quite a bit. So that for me is a bit of an escape. Gives me the focus I need, and then before I go to bed, towards the end of that, I actually like to listen to classical music to some degree. It kind of stimulates different parts of my brain, and I always sit in my far infrared sauna. I have one of those little collapsible ones that kind of just warms the body. For me, it really starts relaxing me. And then sometimes I'll take a quick warm rinse in the shower, and that just gets me ready to sleep. So I've found that for me, delving into the science is a calming effect. So anything that you can find that calms you down, that a passion of yours, whether it's just spending some time drawing, coloring, working on some art, knitting, whatever it may be. Mine happens to be a very nerdy thing, but you might have a much more interesting thing. That's the right thing to do in that evening. Something that gives you focus, poise, and allows you to start forgetting the world around you and bringing your the stress levels and all that down. So that to me helps. And then the sauna and the warm quick rinse really helps me in the evening too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing all your information. Thanks for the 2 gut restoration bundles that you've given out today as well, and the information you'll have. We'll have a link to everything in the show notes for those listening. And I want to thank everyone for being here and sharing this information. You guys see how important this knowledge is, and always there's what's the next one right thing we have to do. And if you feel overwhelmed, just think, what's the one thing I can be doing today? Maybe it's eating more fermented foods, adding those in. Maybe it's really focusing, okay, well, I can do 1 cycle of the spore biotics and 30, 60, 90 days and see, journal. Always you have, for those of you who have my books, The Hormone Fix, you have the questionnaires. Do your medical symptom questionnaire, your hormone toxicity questionnaire, and just monitor your health. And if you can, check those markers, the inflammatory markers. They're in my book too. I also give resource for gut testing. I use many different labs, but definitely I recommend Tony Hoffman's lab. The name is escaping me right now. A stool testing lab, GI map test, and also that's his GI map test. And then Cerex Labs, looking at assay 2. Sometimes you can really see what inflammatory markers are going on. But in general, just listening to your body, you know when you're off, right? And then it's like, okay, what's the next right step I can do to improve my overall health? And you start to feel step by step, piece by piece, that you're making progress. So I encourage you, share this information either from YouTube, my YouTube channel at Dr. Anna Cabeca, or my Facebook page at Dr. Anna C. You can share that with your audiences, do a watch party, and talk about spores and microbiome and the trillions of friendly bacteria that are within us doing what they're doing.
Mhm.
Thank you all for your time. All right, till next time.